My name is Cassandra, but most people call me Cass. I am 40 years old, and if you ask me to describe myself, I'd probably start by saying that I've spent most of my life being the responsible one. The dependable daughter, the solid sister, the friend who always showed up. It sounds noble, maybe even admirable, but when you live that role long enough, it stops feeling like a choice and more like a burden stitched into your skin. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, in a modest neighborhood where everyone knew each other's business. My parents worked hard. My mother was a nurse who rarely had time to rest, and my father drove trucks long haul, sometimes gone for weeks at a time. I was the oldest of 3. My brother Marcus came 6 years after me, and my sister Alana 2 years after him. From the beginning, it was clear that I was expected to be the glue holding everything together whenever Mom or Dad couldn't. By the time I was 14, I was packing school lunches for my siblings, helping Alana with her math homework, and keeping track of Marcus's never-ending basketball practices. I didn't complain, not out loud anyway. It just felt like what I was supposed to do. Responsibility became second nature. Fast forward 26 years, and here I am, a project manager for a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Atlanta. I rent a spacious 2-bedroom apartment in a building that's clean, secure, and close to the office. I don't live extravagantly. I save, I plan, I make careful choices. My friends sometimes tease me, saying I live like someone always preparing for an emergency. Maybe they're right. But that mindset is also the reason I'm financially stable while many of my peers are still drowning in credit card debt. When Marcus told me he was getting married, I was genuinely happy for him. He's 34 now, still the baby of the family in my eyes. He had met his fiancée, Danielle, through mutual friends about 2 years ago. Danielle was complicated, polished, beautiful, always dressed as if she were heading to some gala. But underneath the surface, there was an air of entitlement that rubbed me the wrong way. She rarely acknowledged me when I was around, almost as if I were invisible. Maybe I didn't fit into her curated image of what her future family should look like. Still, I bit my tongue. For Marcus's sake, at first, I thought my role in the wedding would be small, maybe helping with planning or contributing a little financially. I was fine with that. Weddings are expensive, and families often pitch in. But I never expected what I was about to discover. It started innocently. One evening, Marcus called me while I was in the middle of making dinner. "Cass, hey," he said, his voice casual, almost rehearsed. "So, we're looking at venues and the deposit is due next week. Danielle's parents are a bit strapped right now, and Mom and Dad, well, you know how things are with them. I was wondering if you could cover it just temporarily. I'll pay you back." I remember holding the phone to my ear, staring at the pot of simmering pasta. My brother had never been good with money, but I loved him. Without thinking too much, I agreed. The deposit was $7,500, a hefty sum, but not something I couldn't manage. I had savings. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a gesture of support. But then came the catering, the flowers, the photographer, the dresses, the miscellaneous expenses that somehow totaled thousands more. Each time, Marcus came to me, not sheepishly, not apologetically, but with this casual assumption, like I was his safety net. And then, one Saturday afternoon, while visiting my mother, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. Mom was on the phone with Aunt Beverly, her voice carrying from the kitchen. "Yes, Cass is paying for everything," she said proudly, as if bragging. "Marcus and Danielle are so lucky to have her. The wedding is practically hers to give." I froze in the living room, my heart pounding. Paying for everything? My pulse raced as I listened, my chest tightening. When Mom hung up, I confronted her. "What do you mean I'm paying for everything?" I demanded. My voice shook, partly from anger, partly from disbelief. She looked at me, confused, almost offended by my tone. "Well, aren't you? Marcus said you agreed. It's such a blessing, Cassandra. Not everyone has a sister like you." I couldn't believe it. It wasn't just Marcus. My parents, Danielle, her parents, everyone seemed to be under the impression that I was the designated benefactor of this entire wedding. Not once had anyone asked me directly. They had just assumed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the words over and over, paying for everything. The betrayal cut deep, not because of the money itself, but because of the lack of respect, the lack of choice. Over the next few weeks, I watched as the expenses piled higher and higher. Danielle's dream wedding was shaping up to be a lavish event, the kind you'd see in glossy magazines. And all of it was coming out of my pocket. I didn't feel like family anymore. I felt like an ATM. And then came the moment that shifted everything. It was late on a Tuesday evening, and I had stayed behind at the office to finish a report. The building was quiet, almost empty, except for one familiar figure. Mr. Jenkins, our janitor. He was in his late 50s, tall and lean, with kind eyes that always seemed a little tired. We often exchanged small talk, nothing more than pleasantries. But that night, something was different. As I was gathering my things, I noticed him sitting in the break room, staring at a piece of paper with his head in his hands. I hesitated, then walked over. "You okay, Mr. Jenkins?" I asked gently. He looked up, startled, then forced a weak smile. "Oh, hey, Miss Cass. Just trying to figure things out." The paper on the table caught my eye. It was a college tuition bill. His son's name was at the top. He followed my gaze and sighed. My boy got into Georgia Tech, first in the family to make it that far. Bright kid, smarter than I ever was, but money's tight. I don't know how I'm going to swing it. His voice cracked as he spoke. Something in me shifted. In that moment, all I could think about was the absurdity of it all. Here was a man who worked tirelessly every night, cleaning up after people who barely noticed him. A man who wanted nothing more than to see his son succeed. And meanwhile, I was being drained dry for a wedding where I wasn't even respected. I went home that night with a decision brewing in my chest. It was reckless, bold, and completely out of character for me. But it was also the first time in years that I felt alive. The next day, I opened my savings account and began transferring funds, not to the wedding planner, not to Danielle's designer dressmaker, but to a scholarship fund in Mr. Jenkins's son's name. I can't explain the relief I felt. For once, my money was going towards something that mattered, something real. Of course, I knew there would be consequences. I knew Marcus and the rest of my family would explode when they found out. But in that moment, sitting at my computer with the confirmation email glowing on the screen, I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I chose myself. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of the storm. The storm hit faster than I expected. 3 days after I redirected the money, Marcus showed up at my apartment unannounced. I was in the middle of folding laundry when I heard the knock, loud, insistent, the kind of knock that already carried anger inside it. When I opened the door, he was standing there with his arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes blazing. "Cass, what the hell did you do?" he demanded, his voice sharp enough to slice through the air. I froze for a moment, then stepped aside to let him in. "Come inside. Don't make a scene in the hallway." He stormed past me, pacing like a caged animal. Danielle went to pay the florist, and they said the funds weren't there. The photographer called too. "The planner's threatening to cancel everything unless we settle the balance this week." He turned to me, his voice rising. "You told me you'd take care of it." I closed the door behind me, leaning against it for strength. "No, Marcus. I never said I'd pay for your entire wedding. You and everyone else assumed I would. And that's not fair." He stared at me, as if I had just spoken a foreign language. "What are you talking about?" Mom said. "Exactly." I cut in, my voice firm. "Mom said," Danielle said. "You all said, but nobody asked me. You just dumped it on me like I'm some endless bank account." His face twisted with frustration. "Cass, come on. You know I don't have that kind of money. Danielle's parents don't either. You're the only one who can help. It's family." That word, family, landed like a stone in my stomach. I had given so much for family. My 20s, my 30s, my energy, my money. And now, at 40, I was being told that family meant emptying myself completely so that Marcus and Danielle could have a fairy tale wedding. I shook my head slowly. "No, Marcus, I can't do it anymore. I've already paid more than I should have. And the rest? I used it for something that actually matters. His eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I took a breath, steadying myself. I set up a scholarship fund for Mr. Jenkins's son. He's starting college, and they needed help. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus blinked, as if trying to process my words. And then he laughed. Not out of humor, but disbelief. You gave my wedding money to the janitor's kid? His voice dripped with contempt. Are you serious right now, Cass? Yes, I said, my tone unwavering. Because his future is more important than one night of overpriced flowers and catered meals. Because I refuse to be exploited anymore. Marcus threw his hands in the air. Exploited? We're your family. You act like we're strangers begging on the street. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Strangers treat me with more respect than you and Danielle have. At least they'd ask before taking. He stared at me for a long moment, his face a storm of anger, disbelief, and something that looked almost like betrayal. Then, without another word, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I stood there in the silence, my heart pounding. I had known this confrontation was coming, but nothing could prepare me for the weight of it. The fallout was immediate. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Calls from my mother, angry texts from Alana, voicemails from Danielle that grew nastier with each one. They all said the same thing. I was selfish. I was heartless. I had humiliated Marcus and Danielle by pulling the rug out from under them. Mom's voice in one voicemail still echoes in my head. Cassandra, I raised you better than this. Marcus is your brother. This wedding is the most important day of his life, and you've ruined it. Do you know how embarrassed I am to tell people what you did? Fix this, now. Embarrassed, not concerned about me, not curious about why I made the choice. Just embarrassed. I didn't respond right away. I went about my workday, my head heavy with the weight of disappointment pressing down on me from all directions. But underneath the guilt, there was also a quiet strength, a voice whispering that I had done the right thing. Later that week, as I was leaving the office, I ran into Mr. Jenkins in the lobby. He looked different somehow, lighter, though still tired. Miss Cass, he said, his voice warm but hesitant. I don't even know where to begin. My boy got the confirmation letter for the scholarship today. He cried when he read it. I cried too. His eyes glistened as he spoke. I felt my throat tighten. I'm glad. He deserves it, Mr. Jenkins. He's worked hard. He nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he clutched his cap. I don't know why you did it, but I'll never forget this. My family will never forget. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. While my own family tore into me with accusations, here was a man overwhelmed with gratitude. For the first time in a long time, my sacrifice had meaning. But the peace didn't last long. The following Sunday, Mom insisted we have a family meeting at her house. I almost didn't go, but a part of me hoped there would be room for understanding. Maybe if I explained myself, they'd see reason. When I arrived, Marcus and Danielle were already there, sitting on the couch with matching scowls. Alana sat beside them, arms folded, clearly taking their side. Mom stood in the kitchen, her lips pressed into a tight line. The tension in the room was suffocating. Cass, Mom began, her voice cold. Do you realize what you've done to this family? To Marcus? I sat down slowly, folding my hands in my lap. What I did was take control of my own money. Money that I worked for. I never agreed to fund an entire wedding. Danielle scoffed loudly, flipping her hair. This is unbelievable. Do you know how humiliating it is to tell vendors we can't pay? To have people think we're broke? You made us look like fools. I turned to her, my patience thinning. You made yourselves look like fools by planning a wedding you couldn't afford. That's not my responsibility. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. I can't believe you'd choose some janitor's kid over your own brother. That was the breaking point. My hands trembled, but my voice came out steady. Don't you dare twist this into a competition. This isn't about choosing him over you. This is about me refusing to be used. You never once considered what this would cost me, not just financially, but emotionally. You just expected me to carry it all because I've always carried everything. The room went silent. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they understood. But then Mom spoke, her tone final. If you don't fix this, Cassandra, don't expect this family to forgive you. The words stung, cutting deeper than I wanted to admit, but at the same time they freed me. I stood, grabbing my coat. Then maybe forgiveness isn't what I need. Maybe what I need is respect. Without another word, I walked out. That night, lying in bed, I felt the ache of loneliness pressing down on me. But alongside it, there was also clarity. I had chosen something that mattered over something shallow. I had chosen integrity over blind obligation. And though my family may not have understood it yet, I knew that one day the truth of my decision would shine brighter than any chandelier in Danielle's dream wedding ever could. The days after the family meeting felt like walking through a storm without an umbrella. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, but I stopped answering. Every call seemed to be another demand, another accusation, another reminder that in my family's eyes, I had betrayed them. At work, though, life moved on as if nothing had happened. Deadlines still loomed, clients still expected flawless presentations, and my team still looked to me for guidance. Oddly, that routine became my lifeline. While my personal world crumbled, the office was steady, predictable. But beneath the surface, I carried the weight of guilt and defiance tangled together. Some nights I lay awake wondering if I had gone too far. Other nights I reminded myself of Mr. Jenkins's tears of gratitude and his son's excitement for the future. That memory kept me grounded. It was during one of those restless nights that I received an unexpected message from Danielle. The text was short, sharp, and unmistakably hers. "Meet me tomorrow. Coffee at Luna's Cafe, 11 a.m. Don't be late." I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether to go. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on. But another part of me, curious, maybe stubborn, needed to hear what she had to say. Luna's Cafe was a trendy spot downtown, all exposed brick and overpriced lattes. When I walked in, Danielle was already there, sitting by the window in a sleek white blazer, her nails perfectly manicured, a diamond bracelet glinting on her wrist. She looked like she had stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. As I approached, she didn't smile. Instead, she folded her arms across her chest. "Sit," she said flatly. I slid into the chair across from her, setting my bag on the floor. "You wanted to talk?" She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Let's cut the crap, Cassandra. You embarrassed Marcus. You embarrassed me. People are talking, and do you know what they're saying? That his own sister doesn't believe in us enough to support our marriage?" I bit back a laugh. "Support your marriage? Danielle, a marriage isn't about a wedding budget. If your relationship depends on me funding your big day, maybe you should rethink it." Her lips curled into a cold smile. "You think you're so noble, giving money to some janitor's kid. But let me tell you something. You've ruined more than just a wedding. You've ruined your relationship with this family. And trust me, once people take sides, you'll regret the side you chose." I held her gaze, refusing to flinch. "If loyalty means bankrupting myself for your vanity, then maybe I'm glad to be on the other side." For a moment, she just stared at me, her face hard. Then she leaned back, her smile growing wider, almost triumphant. "Fine. But don't expect an invitation when the wedding goes on without you." I felt a sting, but I refused to let her see it. I picked up my bag and stood. "That's your choice, not mine." As I walked out of the cafe, I realized something important. Danielle wasn't angry because I refused to pay. She was angry because I had taken control, because I had disrupted the narrative where I was supposed to be silent and compliant. For the first time in years, I felt like I had stepped out of the role they'd written for me and claimed my own. The following week, I bumped into Mr. Jenkins again in the lobby of my building. This time, he had his son with him, a tall, lanky teenager with bright eyes and a nervous smile. "Miss Cass, this is my boy, Andre," Mr. Jenkins said, his chest swelling with pride. Andre extended his hand, his voice quiet but steady. "Thank you, ma'am, for everything. I don't even know how to say it, but you changed my life." His words hit me harder than I expected. I shook his hand, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "You don't owe me thanks, Andre. Just make the most of it. That's all I ask." He nodded eagerly. "I will. I promise." Watching him, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. While my family was consumed with appearances and money, here was a young man ready to chase opportunity with everything he had. That, I realized, was the kind of legacy I wanted my money to create. Not a rented ballroom and a forgettable night, but a chance for someone to break free of limits. But hope didn't erase the pain. The weekend of the wedding arrived sooner than I expected. I wasn't invited, of course. My mother didn't call, Marcus didn't text, and Alana kept her silence too. On the morning of the ceremony, I sat alone in my apartment, the distant sound of church bells drifting through my window. I imagined the scene: Danielle in her designer gown, Marcus in a tailored suit, my relatives gathered with forced smiles. I tried to distract myself with work, with cleaning, with anything that would quiet the ache inside me. But around noon, my phone buzzed with a notification, a photo posted on social media. There they were, Marcus and Danielle, beaming at the altar. The caption read, "A perfect day, thanks to family love and sacrifice." Sacrifice. The word cut deep. They had erased me from the story, rewritten it as if my contributions had never existed. I set the phone down and walked to the window, staring at the city below. For the first time, I let myself cry, not out of regret for what I had done, but out of grief for what I had lost. My family, my place among them. And yet, even through the tears, I knew I wouldn't change my decision, because deep down, I understood something they didn't. True love, true loyalty, true sacrifice. They don't demand you lose yourself. They don't strip you of respect. They lift you. That night, I cooked myself dinner, poured a glass of wine, and sat at the table alone. The silence was heavy, but it was mine. As I ate, I thought about the future, about the friendships I had neglected, the dreams I had put off, the parts of myself I had buried under obligation. Maybe this rupture with my family wasn't just an ending. Maybe it was an opening to redefine who I was, to choose finally what mattered to me. And as I closed my eyes, I saw Andre's smile, full of hope, and I knew I hadn't lost everything. I had just begun to gain myself. The week after the wedding, the silence from my family became deafening. No calls, no texts, no updates. It was as if I had been erased from their circle, cut off like an unwanted branch on a family tree. At first, I thought the quiet would bring me peace, but instead, it settled in my chest like a weight. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone, expecting a message from Marcus, or at least a passive-aggressive text from Alana. Nothing. It was as if I didn't exist to them anymore. The strangest part was realizing that despite everything, I still cared. I wanted to know if Marcus was happy, if Mom had enjoyed herself, if Danielle got the grand fairy tale she had demanded. But pride wouldn't let me ask. Pride and the fear of hearing their answers. Work became my distraction. I threw myself into projects, taking on extra tasks, staying late even when I didn't need to. My boss praised my dedication, but my coworkers noticed the change. One evening, as I packed up my laptop, my colleague Sarah approached me. She was younger than me, maybe 28, always cheerful and chatty. "You've been here late every night this week," she said, tilting her head. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "Just keeping busy." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "If this is about your family, Cass, I just want to say, I think you did the right thing." I froze, caught off guard. "You heard?" Sarah shrugged. "News travels fast in this office. Mr. Jenkins is loved around here, and when people found out what you did for his son, well, let's just say your reputation went from respected to legendary." Heat rushed to my face. I wasn't used to being praised for something so personal. "I didn't do it for recognition," I murmured. "I know," she said softly. "That's what makes it powerful." Her words lingered with me long after I left the office. Maybe my family saw me as selfish, but here, in this circle, people saw me differently, and maybe that mattered more than I realized. The following Saturday, I went grocery shopping at the neighborhood market. I was pushing my cart down the produce aisle when I heard someone call my name. "Miss Cass." I turned and saw Andre jogging toward me, waving. His father followed behind, smiling wide. Andre was glowing. His whole face lit up with the kind of excitement only youth could hold. "I got my first week's assignments at Georgia Tech," he said breathlessly. "It's hard, but I'm doing it. I'm really doing it." I couldn't help but smile. "I never doubted you." Mr. Jenkins clasped my hand in both of his. "We'll never stop being grateful for what you did. Andre's future looks brighter than I ever dreamed, and that's because of you." For a moment, the heaviness in my chest lifted. Standing there in the middle of the grocery store, I felt something my family had failed to give me: genuine appreciation. As I walked away with my cart, I realized that maybe family wasn't just blood. Maybe family was also the people who recognized your worth, who didn't take you for granted. But just when I started to feel a fragile sense of peace, the past came crashing back in. On Sunday evening, as I sat reading on my couch, the doorbell rang. My stomach tightened when I looked through the peephole. It was Mom. I opened the door cautiously. "Hi, Mom." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Her face was stern, but there was something else in her eyes too. Weariness, maybe regret. "We need to talk," she said. I gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing, arms crossed. "Cassandra," she began, her tone heavy, "do you realize how much hurt you've caused? Marcus barely looked at me during the wedding. Danielle's parents were humiliated. Everyone kept asking why you weren't there. Do you know how painful it was to explain?" I swallowed hard. "And do you realize how painful it was for me to be treated like nothing more than a wallet?" "No one asked how I felt, Mom. Not once." Her eyes flickered, but she didn't soften. "Families make sacrifices. That's what we do." "I've been sacrificing my whole life," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "When Dad was gone, I took care of Marcus and Alana. When money was tight, I picked up extra shifts. Every time someone needed something, I was there. But the moment I needed respect, I got silence." "Tell me, Mom, when does the sacrificing end? When do I get to matter?" For the first time, her expression faltered. She sat down slowly, her hands twisting in her lap. "You've always mattered, Cassandra. Maybe I just assumed you were strong enough to handle it. Too strong, maybe." Her words pierced me in a way I didn't expect. Strong. That's what they had always called me. As if strength excused neglect. As if my ability to endure meant I didn't deserve support. I sat beside her, my voice quieter now. "Being strong doesn't mean I don't hurt. It doesn't mean I don't need to be seen." We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she sighed. "I can't promise Danielle will ever forgive you. Marcus, well, he's stubborn, you know that. But me? I'll try to understand. I don't want to lose my daughter over this." A lump formed in my throat. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was something. A crack in the wall between us. "Thank you," I whispered. After Mom left, I sat on the couch for a long time, replaying her words. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, someday, things could mend. Maybe not with Danielle, maybe not even with Marcus, but with Mom at least, there was a chance. And that small chance was enough to keep me going. The next morning, I walked into the office with a lighter step. As I passed Mr. Jenkins in the hallway, he gave me a nod, and I returned it with a smile. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. Not because my family had accepted me, but because I had accepted myself. I had chosen respect over compliance, integrity over obligation. And while the cost was high, I knew deep down it was the only choice I could have lived with. What I didn't know then was that the consequences of that choice weren't over. Not by a long shot. Because sometimes when you take a stand, the world doesn't just push back, it fights to pull you under. And I was about to find out just how far that fight could go. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence from family rarely lasts. And sure enough, a week after Mom's visit, the storm roared back to life. It began with a phone call from Alana. I almost didn't answer. I had grown tired of the constant accusations, but something in me hoped my younger sister might bring a different tone. "Cass," she said, as soon as I picked up, her voice sharp. "I can't believe what you've done." I sighed, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. "Hello to you too, Alana." "What now?" "Marcus called me last night," she snapped. He said Danielle's parents are still scrambling to pay off the vendors. They had to take out a loan because of you. I leaned against the counter, gripping it for balance. Alana, I never agreed to pay for their wedding. It's not my fault they planned something they couldn't afford. But you had the money, she shot back. You just gave it to some stranger instead. Not a stranger, I said firmly. Mr. Jenkins has been cleaning that office building for years. His son deserves a chance. That money wasn't wasted. It was invested in someone's future. Her silence lasted only a second before she exploded again. So you chose them over us, over family. Her words echoed Marcus's from before, and I felt the same sting. I didn't choose anyone over anyone, I said quietly. I chose myself. I chose to stop being taken advantage of. You're selfish, Alana hissed. And honestly, don't expect me to defend you anymore. Not to Marcus, not to anyone. The line went dead before I could respond. The weight of her words lingered long after the call ended. I tried to shake it off, but deep down, I knew what this was really about. It wasn't just the money. It was about control. For years, my family had come to rely on me as the one who held everything together. And now that I had stepped out of that role, they didn't know how to handle it. They called it betrayal, but I called it freedom. Still, freedom was lonely. One evening, Sarah invited me out for drinks after work. I almost declined. I wasn't in the mood to socialize, but something told me I needed to get out of my apartment. We met at a small bar not far from the office. It was dimly lit, with jazz music playing softly in the background. Sarah ordered us cocktails and leaned in as soon as we sat down. "So," she said with a mischievous smile, "how does it feel to be the office hero?" I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Hero? That's a stretch." "Not really," she said. "People admire what you did. It takes guts to stand up to family like that. Most people would have caved." I sipped my drink, the warmth spreading through me. Sometimes I wonder if I should have caved. It would have been easier. Sarah studied me for a moment, her expression softening. Easier isn't always better. You chose something meaningful. That's rare. Her words soothed a part of me I didn't realize was aching. For once, I wasn't being criticized or condemned. I was being understood. A week later, the fallout escalated again. I was walking home from work when I noticed a group of neighbors gathered near the entrance of my building, whispering and pointing at their phones. As I passed, one of them gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe, or judgment. Confused, I hurried upstairs and opened my own phone. That's when I saw it. Danielle had posted a long rant on social media, tagging me by name. She painted me as the villain, the selfish sister who had abandoned her family, stolen from her brother, and ruined the happiest day of their lives. The post had dozens of comments already, mostly from her friends and acquaintances, piling on with insults. I sat on my couch, my hands shaking as I scrolled. The lies stung, but the betrayal cut deeper. Danielle hadn't just turned my family against me. She was trying to turn the whole community. My phone buzzed with a new message, this time from a number I didn't recognize. "Saw what your sister-in-law posted. Just know not everyone believes it. Keep your head up." I stared at the message, tears welling in my eyes. Whoever it was, they had no idea how much I needed those words. The next day at work, I tried to keep my head down, but Sarah noticed the change in me immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked gently as we sat in the break room. I slid my phone across the table, showing her the post. She read it quickly, her eyes narrowing. "Wow, she really went for blood. Now everyone knows my business," I muttered. "It's humiliating." Sarah reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "Cass, listen to me. Anyone who knows you won't believe a word of that. And the people who don't, they don't matter." Her confidence was reassuring, but I couldn't shake the knot in my stomach. That evening, as I walked into my building, Mr. Jenkins caught me in the lobby. "Miss Cass," he said softly, "I saw what's going around online. My wife saw it too. We want you to know, you did nothing wrong. What you did for Andre was a blessing. Don't let anyone take that away from you." I felt my throat tighten. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. That means more than you know." He nodded firmly. "Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you. Remember that." His words stayed with me all night. The next weekend, I made a decision. I logged onto social media for the first time since Danielle's post and wrote my own. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs. I didn't attack anyone or try to defend myself point by point. Instead, I told the truth. That I had been expected to fund a wedding without ever being asked, that I had redirected the money to a scholarship because I wanted it to mean something, and that I stood by my choice. I ended it with a simple line. Respect is not selfish. Boundaries are not betrayal. I hit post and set my phone down, my heart racing. Within minutes, the comments started coming in. Some were harsh, echoing Danielle's accusations, but many, far more than I expected, were supportive. Friends from college, old co-workers, even distant relatives messaged me privately to say they admired my courage. For the first time since this all began, I felt like my voice had finally been heard. Later that night, as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had gained. I had lost the easy closeness of my family, maybe permanently, but I had gained respect from others and from myself. And maybe that was worth the price. What I didn't know then was that the cracks between us were about to widen even further, because when people feel exposed, they don't retreat quietly, they fight back. And Danielle was far from finished with me. I should have known Danielle wouldn't stop at a single post. Humiliation wasn't enough for her, she wanted destruction. It began with whispers. A coworker pulled me aside in the hallway, hesitant. "Cass, someone's spreading stories about you, stuff that doesn't sound right." I didn't ask for details. I already knew the source. By Thursday, the rumors reached my boss. He called me into his office, his expression uneasy. "Cass, you know I value you here, but there's talk about financial dishonesty. Something about you taking money from your family?" I sat up straighter, my stomach twisting. "That's not true. I gave my own money to a scholarship fund. My family wanted me to bankroll a wedding, and I said no. That's it." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "I figured it was something like that. Your track record here speaks louder than gossip. Just keep your head down until it blows over." I thanked him, but the damage was done. Even if he believed me, the whispers still spread. People love scandal more than truth. That weekend, I got a call from Marcus. My chest tightened when I saw his name flash on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Cass," he began, his voice cold. "You need to stop embarrassing us." I clenched the phone. "I haven't said a word about you. Danielle dragged this into the public. I just told the truth." "The truth," he snapped. "You humiliated us. Danielle's friends, her co-workers, they're all talking. Do you know how that makes her look?" I couldn't stop myself. Maybe if she spent less time worrying about appearances and more time on her marriage, she wouldn't care so much about what people think. There was a long pause. Then his voice dropped, sharp and final. "You're dead to me, Cassandra." The line went silent. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Marcus, my baby brother, the one I had raised more like a son than a sibling, had cut me off completely. I sank onto the couch, tears burning my eyes. I had expected anger, maybe even resentment, but hearing him disown me ripped open something deeper, something I didn't know how to close. The following Monday, I tried to drown myself in work again, but Sarah noticed the change immediately. "Cass," she said gently, "you look like you haven't slept in days." I sighed. Marcus said I'm dead to him. Her eyes widened. "I'm so sorry." I shook my head, swallowing hard. "I raised him, Sarah. When Mom was working nights and Dad was on the road, I was the one who made sure he ate, who got him to school, who stayed up when he was sick. And now, because I wouldn't pay for his wedding, I'm nothing to him." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "That's not on you. That's on him. People who love conditionally don't really love at all." Her words were comforting, but the ache inside me remained. That evening, as I walked into my apartment building, Mr. Jenkins stopped me in the lobby. "Miss Cass," he said quietly, "Andre told me what's been happening. I'm sorry your family's treating you this way." I forced a smile. "It's not your burden, Mr. Jenkins. Don't worry about it." But he shook his head firmly. "No, ma'am. You gave my boy a future. The least I can do is remind you, you're not alone." His kindness cracked something in me. I blinked back tears. "Thank you. That means more than I can say." He nodded, his eyes kind. "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who chooses to stand with you." His words stayed with me long after I went upstairs. A week later, the situation escalated again. I received a letter in the mail, formal, cold, with Marcus and Danielle's names at the bottom. It was a demand for repayment. They were claiming that the money I had initially given for deposits had been a loan, and since I had failed to uphold my promise to fund the wedding, I now owed them damages. I laughed bitterly when I read it. They were treating me like a business transaction, not a sister. But when I showed the letter to a lawyer friend, the laughter faded. "Technically, if they can prove you agreed to cover expenses, they might have a case," she said carefully. "Even if it's just small claims, it could get messy." The thought of facing them in court made my stomach churn. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about principle, about how far they were willing to go to punish me. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, staring at the city lights. I felt small, cornered, exhausted. But as I sat there, I remembered Andre's face when he shook my hand, his promise, his gratitude. And I realized something. I would do it all over again. Even if it cost me my family, even if it dragged me through court, because helping him had given me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. And no lawsuit, no slander, no disownment could erase that. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing in a crowded hallway at the county courthouse, clutching a folder of documents. Marcus and Danielle were a few feet away, whispering to their lawyer, their faces smug and self-assured. When Marcus's eyes met mine, there was no warmth, no recognition, just coldness. My chest ached, but I lifted my chin. The judge eventually dismissed most of their claims, citing lack of evidence. The only thing left was a dispute over the initial deposit, which I was ordered to split with them. A small victory for them, but not the crushing defeat they'd hoped for. As we left the courtroom, Danielle muttered under her breath, loud enough for me to hear, "Pathetic." I ignored her. For once, their words didn't land. Because I realized something as I walked out of that courthouse. They couldn't take away my dignity unless I handed it to them. And I wasn't about to do that. That night, I called Mom. She answered on the second ring, her voice weary. "Cass," she said softly. "I heard about court." "Yeah," I said. "It's over now." There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "I wish things hadn't gone this way." "Me too," I admitted. But deep down, I knew this was the path it had to take. Sometimes the only way to break free is to let everything shatter first. And though the pieces of my family lay scattered around me, I felt a strange calm. Because maybe, just maybe, I was finally building a life on my own terms. But calm never lasts. And as I would soon learn, Danielle wasn't done yet. Not even close. The first hint that Danielle wasn't done came in the form of a calendar invite from HR. The subject line read, "Informational meeting, policy review." No explanation, just a room number and time. The kind of email that makes your stomach drop even when you know you haven't done anything wrong. I arrived early and sat in the small conference room, palms flat on the cool table. The HR director, Maya Thompson, walked in with a notepad and the careful, practiced smile of someone who has to deliver other people's messes for a living. "Thanks for making time, Cass," she began, her tone neutral, the kind you use with people you like but need to evaluate. "We received an anonymous complaint about you. I'm going to say up front, this is routine, and we haven't drawn any conclusions." "What's the accusation?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, though my pulse thudded in my ears. Maya folded her hands. "The complaint alleges you misused the company's charitable matching program for personal gain and coerced a building staff member into providing favors in exchange for a donation to his family." She paused, studying my face. "Specifically, it says you tied the scholarship to preferential treatment of your project spaces." I let out a breath that was almost a laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. I didn't use the matching program. I paid out of my own savings, and I would never, ever ask Mr. Jenkins for anything in exchange. He's the one who does us a kindness by keeping this place clean when no one's looking. Maya nodded slowly. "That's what I figured. Still, we have to document. Do you have proof the funds were personal and not matched? I do, I answered, already reaching for the folder I'd brought. Bank statements, emails, the scholarship confirmation, and the court papers from Marcus and Danielle's attempt to claim the deposits were a loan. That was dismissed, mostly. It might give context. She paged through, her brow easing as she skimmed the confirmations. This is thorough, she said, relief slipping into her voice. I'll also talk with facilities about whether there's been any, let's say, odd requests related to janitorial services. Please do, I replied. And you can speak to Mr. Jenkins. I haven't asked him for anything. If anything, he keeps trying to tell me I'm not alone. Maya's eyes softened. I've heard he's a good man, she said almost to herself. Then she looked at me again. We'll close this quickly. I can't say for sure, but I've seen enough of these to know when someone's stirring the pot. Danielle, I said quietly, the name tasting like metal. Maya didn't confirm, but she didn't deny either. You'll hear from me by week's end. When I left the room, my legs felt heavier than when I'd walked in. The clear sky through the lobby's glass wall looked fake, like a backdrop I could poke my finger through and find only plaster. I passed Mr. Jenkins near the service elevator. He paused, studying my face. You're all right? He asked, gentle as always. Been better, I admitted, forcing a small smile. HR thing. Someone said I used the donation to get favors from you. His head snapped back, eyes wide. Lord, no. I'll tell them that's a lie, he said, voice firm. You never asked me for a single thing, not one. I'm headed up there now anyway. I'll set it right. The gratitude rose in me like heat. Thank you, I murmured. I hate that you even have to deal with this. He shook his head. We deal with what we must. That's life, he replied, voice steady. By Friday afternoon, Maya found me at my desk and tapped twice on the partition. Closed, she said softly. No policy issues. Facilities corroborated, and Mr. Jenkins gave a statement. I've added a note to your file in case anything like this resurfaces. Thank you, I said, meaning it. My shoulders dropped, heavy tension easing like a knot finally worked loose. But the reprieve was brief. The following Tuesday, my personal email pinged with a subject line that made my blood run cold. Payment reminder. Remaining balance on upgrades. The sender was a boutique rental company I vaguely recognized from Danielle's Pinterest boards. Gold flatware, glass chargers, those ridiculous velvet chairs that make everyone sit up straight for photos. The message began politely and then turned pointed. Per your email authorization, we processed premium upgrades for the Lansdowne Hall event on the date of wedding date. We have not received final payment. Please see attached signed agreement and kindly remit the balance within 10 business days to avoid collections. Attached was a PDF. I opened it, hands shaking. There it was, a signature that was supposed to be mine. The scrawl didn't look anything like my handwriting. Worse, the email shown in the header was cassandra.financesigmail. Not my address, not close enough to be a typo, but similar enough for a careless vendor to accept without scrutiny. They had included an email thread too. The Cass on the other end approved a list of upgrades in a tone that made my jaw tighten. Let's do the diamond package. Family is covering it. Proceed, Cassandra. The flourish of the dash and name, practiced and eerie, felt like an intrusion into my skin. I called the number at the bottom of the email. A woman picked up, professional and brisk. This is Cassandra Rivers, I began, my voice tight but controlled. I just received a notice claiming I authorized upgrades for a wedding at Lansdowne Hall. That signature is forged. The email isn't mine. There was a pause, then paper shuffling on her end. One moment, she replied, careful now. We processed the order per written approval. The contact email was Cassandra R. Finances. That's not my address, I cut in. Whoever wrote to you impersonated me. I can send you my actual email history, and a police report if needed. Her tone shifted, the defensive edge retreating. I understand. Please forward documentation. If this was fraud, we need to correct our records. I sent everything. My ID, the HR statement note, the court summary, the scholarship confirmation, anything that proved my identity and the chain of events. 10 minutes later, she called back, voice apologetic. We'll remove your name from the invoice immediately, she said, sounding sincere now. We'll pursue the client of record, which appears to be Mrs. Danielle Carter. I'm sorry for the confusion. It's more than confusion, I said quietly. It's a pattern. After we hung up, I sat staring at the wall, the air in my apartment too still. The realization sank in. Danielle hadn't only smeared me. She had fabricated an email address to impersonate me with vendors, to trap me in bills and blame. I took the PDF to a precinct the next afternoon and filed a report. The officer at the desk, a woman with tired eyes and a practiced calm, asked methodical questions and typed as I answered. Impersonation via email, forged signature, attempted financial harm, she said, summarizing. We'll open a case. To be transparent, cyber stuff can be slow, but the paper trail helps. I don't need a headline, I replied. I just need it on record. She nodded once. That, we can do. I left with a case number in my pocket and a thin sense of vindication that tasted more like ash than victory. That evening, I called Mom. She picked up on the second ring, voice wary, like she was bracing for impact. Mom, I said, keeping my words even. A rental company reached out to me about unpaid upgrades. They had a forged signature and a fake email account in my name. I filed a police report. There was silence. When she spoke, her voice was small. A thread pulled loose. Cassandra, are you saying Danielle pretended to be you? I'm saying someone did, I answered, careful but firm. And considering the upgrades were for her wedding, the trail doesn't point to a stranger. I could hear her breath over the line, unsteady. I'll talk to Marcus, she whispered, sounding older than I'd ever heard her. Please do, I said, because this isn't just family drama anymore. We hung up, and for the first time since this all began, I felt the tiniest tilt in the ground beneath Marcus and Danielle's fortress. Not a collapse, just the faintest shiver of doubt. 2 days later, an email from Maya pinged, external verification. She'd been contacted by the vendor too, asked to validate my employment dates against the forged email thread's claims. She confirmed the dates, included the HR closure note, and copied me, an act of quiet solidarity that warmed me more than I expected. On Saturday morning, I found a letter slipped under my apartment door, a handwritten note on thick stationery I recognized from a wedding invitation I'd never received. Danielle's cursive was sharp enough to cut. You're pathetic, it began, no greeting. You can file reports, stir up pity at your little office, and hide behind the janitor you bought, but you can't undo what you did to this family. Pay what you owe, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman you are. I read it twice, then a third time, the words shifting from threat to confession in my mind. She'd put it in writing. She'd admitted the smear campaign, if not the forgery, and she'd doubled down on demeaning the scholarship as something I used to buy someone. I took a photo of the note, added it to the police report email thread, and then tucked the original into a folder labeled Evidence, a label I never thought I'd need for members of my own family. When the heaviness got too thick, I drove to the tech campus and walked the edge of the quad at sunset. Students in hoodies and backpacks flowed around me like a current, laughter and debate and soft music spilling from open windows. Life everywhere, possibility humming. I spotted Andre sitting beneath a live oak with a small group, laptops open, the glow on their faces warm against the blue dusk. He saw me, surprised, then waved me over. How's it going? I asked, easing onto the grass. Hard, he said, smiling. Good hard. He angled the screen to show me a CAD model of a bridge project. We're building this in the lab next week. I traced the lines with my eyes, the neat geometry of purpose. It's beautiful, I said, meaning it. Hey, he added, lowering his voice as his friends peeled away. My dad told me people been saying things about you. I told him it's noise. I'm gonna make you proud. You already did, I answered. And the words surprised me with the way they loosened something tight in my chest. On my drive home, the city felt less like a maze and more like a map I finally knew how to read. Streetlights winked awake. A couple argued mildly at a crosswalk and then laughed. A busker tuned his guitar near the corner where the barbecue place always smelled like Sundays. Ordinary life, steady and real. Monday brought a final turn I didn't anticipate. Our CEO held a brief all-hands in the atrium to announce a new community initiative: scholarships for building staff families at our campus and partner properties. A seed, he said, from something one of our own did quietly, the right way. He didn't say my name. He didn't need to. People glanced my way and then politely away again, a private recognition that didn't demand attention. After, Maya passed me a small envelope. Some mail found its way to HR, she said. Inside was a typed note from the rental company confirming they had removed my name from all records and were pursuing the correct party for payment. No drama. Just a clean, administrative end to one of the many threads. That night, as I washed dishes in my quiet kitchen, I thought about humiliation and justice, how often they arrive out of sync. I'd been dragged, maligned, cut from the family story with cold, careless strokes. And yet, somewhere else, a different story had taken root, one where truth didn't need a spotlight to be seen. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Mom. I spoke to Marcus. He wouldn't listen, but I'm listening. I'm sorry for the things I didn't see. I stood there with my hands in the soapy water, eyes blurring. I typed back slowly, "Thank you." That's a start. I dried my hands and looked around my apartment. The plant I kept forgetting to water, the framed print of the high museum stairwell, the stack of library books threatening to topple. It wasn't the loud house of my childhood or the curated perfection of Danielle's feed. It was quiet, lived in, mine. Danielle wasn't done. I knew that. People like her don't stop when the mirror shows them a truth they don't like. But I was different too. Not the bank, not the scapegoat, not the silent, tireless older sister who swallowed every insult and called it love. I was a woman who chose where her money went, where her care went, where her boundaries stood. And if the next wave was coming, I would meet it upright, anchored by something bigger than anger, by purpose, by community, by the certainty that I didn't need their approval to live a decent life. The city hummed outside my window. I turned off the kitchen light and let the room hold me, the steady dark no longer frightening, but full, like a deep breath, before the next step forward. The letter from Danielle should have rattled me more than it did. For years, her words, her sharpness, her judgment had gotten under my skin. But now, with everything she had already tried, the threats felt like echoes in a canyon, loud at first, but fading with distance. Still, I kept the letter. Evidence. That week, I noticed something shifting at work. Colleagues who had once avoided eye contact in the hallway began offering small nods, little acknowledgments that said more than words. Sarah left a coffee on my desk one morning with a sticky note that read, "Respect isn't selfish." And Mr. Jenkins? Every time I passed him, he smiled wider, stood taller. His pride in Andre was contagious. I saw it in the way he walked, lighter than before, like the future had finally stretched out ahead of his family. Yet even with these glimmers of hope, I felt the undercurrent of Danielle's next move. She was quiet, too quiet. I had learned that silence from her wasn't peace. It was plotting. The next blow came through Mom. It was a Thursday evening, and I was at home unwinding with a glass of wine when my phone buzzed. Mom's name lit the screen. "Cass," she said, her tone tight. "Marcus and Danielle came by earlier." I held my breath, waiting. They said... Mom hesitated. "They said you only gave money to that boy to make yourself look good. That it wasn't generosity, it was manipulation, a way to prove you were better than them." I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers to my temple. "And you believe that?" "No," she said quickly. "Not anymore. But Cassandra, you have to understand. They're telling everyone who will listen. Neighbors, relatives, even people at church. They're painting you as someone who used a poor family to boost your ego." The words stung. Not because they were true, but because I knew how easily people believed lies that fit their picture of you. "Mom," I said carefully, "I can't control what they say. I can only live in a way that proves them wrong." There was silence on the line before she whispered, "I just don't want to lose all my children." Her words cracked something inside me. I wanted to tell her she wouldn't lose me, but I also knew I couldn't keep sacrificing myself just to keep the peace. The following weekend, I was at the grocery store again when a woman approached me. I recognized her vaguely from Mom's church. A friend of Aunt Beverly's. I heard about what you did, she said, her tone a mix of curiosity and accusation. Giving all that money to a janitor's boy instead of your own family? Some folks think that's cold. I met her gaze calmly. Some folks don't know the whole story. She sniffed, clearly unimpressed. But as she walked away, another woman, a stranger, touched my arm. Don't let them get to you, she said softly. What you did was right. More people should do the same. That moment stayed with me. For every voice tearing me down, there was another lifting me up. Maybe quieter, maybe less dramatic, but steady, real. A week later, Andre asked me to meet him on campus. I drove down on a breezy Saturday morning, the kind where the air feels fresh with possibility. He greeted me near the library steps, his backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes bright. Miss Cass, I wanted to show you something, he said, leading me inside. He pulled me into a small study room where his laptop was open. On the screen was an essay draft titled, Why I Want to Be an Engineer. I'm applying for an additional grant, he explained, and I wrote about what you did for me. Not just the money, but the belief. I thought you might want to read it. I sat down, heart pounding as I scanned the words. He wrote about watching his father work nights, about how college had always felt like a dream slipping away, and about the day he found out someone he barely knew had invested in his future. She gave me more than money, the essay read. She gave me permission to believe I was worth it. By the time I finished, my eyes blurred with tears. Andre, this is beautiful, I whispered. He shrugged, embarrassed but smiling. I meant every word. I hugged him, and in that moment, I felt more connected to him than I had to my own brother in years. But just when I thought maybe things were starting to turn, Danielle struck again. That Monday, I received another envelope, this time from the bank. Inside was a notification that a new credit card had been opened under my name. The balance was already maxed at nearly $5,000. Charges from boutiques, restaurants, even a luxury spa. Fraud. Again. I called the bank immediately, my voice shaking as I explained. They froze the account, flagged it for investigation, and promised to remove the charges once they confirmed the fraud. But the pattern was clear. Danielle wasn't satisfied with ruining my reputation. She wanted to destroy me, financially. I filed another police report, attaching the bank letter and the credit card statement. The officer nodded grimly as he added it to my case file. Looks like targeted harassment, he said. Keep every document, every letter. The more evidence we have, the stronger the case if it goes to court. I left the station feeling drained, but also strangely resolute. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was documenting, building, preparing. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, spreading out the folder labeled Evidence. Danielle's handwritten note, the forged invoice, the fake email thread, the credit card statement. Each piece was ugly, painful, but together they formed a story I could prove. I wasn't powerless. The next day, Maya stopped by my desk at work. I heard from facilities, she said quietly. Apparently Danielle called the building office, asking if they'd noticed you giving special treatment to Mr. Jenkins. They didn't entertain it, but I thought you should know. I felt my jaw tighten. She won't stop. No, Maya agreed, but you're handling it. Just keep your records. Truth has a way of surfacing. Her faith in me steadied something inside. That Friday evening, as I walked home, my phone buzzed with a new message. This time it wasn't from Mom, or Alana, or even an unknown number. It was from Marcus. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, my heart thudding. After weeks of silence, after courtroom battles and social media smears, Marcus wanted to talk. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I set the phone down, pacing my apartment as memories of our childhood flooded back. Late nights when I tucked him into bed, the times I defended him at school, the countless sacrifices I made so he could feel secure. Did he remember any of that? Or had Danielle erased it all? I poured myself another glass of wine and finally typed back, "When you're ready to talk with respect, I'll listen." No response came. But for once, I didn't feel desperate for one. Because whether Marcus ever came around or not, I was done begging for dignity. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lawsuits, the lies, the fraud. And yet, despite it all, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Strength. Not the kind of strength my family demanded from me, the endless giving and self-sacrifice, but the kind of strength that came from saying no, from standing tall even when people tried to drag you down. And I realized Danielle could forge signatures, spread lies, even ruin my credit, but she couldn't touch the one thing that mattered most: my integrity. The message from Marcus stayed on my phone screen like a stain I couldn't scrub out. "We need to talk." 3 simple words, but heavy with all the history between us. Years of loyalty, sacrifices I made without thanks, the countless times I put his needs above mine. And yet, those same 3 words carried the weight of betrayal. Because when it mattered most, Marcus hadn't defended me. He hadn't stood by me. He'd stood with Danielle. For 2 days, I left the message unanswered. I went to work, cooked meals, folded laundry, tried to live in the rhythm of ordinary life, but his voice echoed in my head. "You're dead to me." Finally, on Sunday afternoon, I agreed to meet him. Neutral ground, a diner off I-85 where we'd gone as kids after church sometimes. Marcus was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth with his shoulders hunched, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. He looked older than I remembered, tired, almost fragile. But when his eyes met mine, there was still that edge of stubbornness I knew too well. I slid into the booth across from him, keeping my expression guarded. "Thanks for coming," he muttered, as if the words burned his tongue. I nodded. "You said you wanted to talk," he exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, things got out of hand. Danielle, the wedding, the money, it all spiraled. I shouldn't have said you were dead to me." The words hit me, but I kept my face still. "You did say it, and you meant it in that moment." His jaw tightened. "I was angry. You blindsided us. We thought you had our backs." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "No, Marcus, you assumed. You never asked. You put me in a position where the only value I had to you was my bank account. Do you have any idea how that feels?" He looked down at his coffee, silent. I pressed on. "I've been sacrificing for this family since I was a teenager. When Mom worked nights, I raised you. When Dad was gone, I made sure the house didn't fall apart. And after all of that, the one time I said no, you cut me out. You and Danielle tried to destroy me." His head snapped up, guilt flickering across his face. "That wasn't me. That was her." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't separate yourself. She might have written the posts, forged the emails, opened the cards, but you let her. You stood by her side and let her drag me through the mud." Marcus swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. "I didn't know how far she'd go." "Maybe not," I said, my voice softening. "But you knew she was going too far. And you still stayed quiet." The silence between us stretched, heavy and raw. Finally Marcus spoke, his voice breaking. "Cass, I don't know how to fix this." I sat back, studying him. Part of me wanted to reach across the table to pull him back into the fold of forgiveness. But another part, the part that had been scarred by weeks of betrayal, knew it wasn't that simple. "You don't fix it with words," I said finally. "You fix it by actions. By drawing a line between yourself and Danielle's cruelty. By proving you see me as more than a bank." He nodded slowly, as if absorbing the weight of my demand. "I'll try." "Don't try," I replied. "Do." When I left the diner, my chest felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter, because Marcus had cracked open a door I thought he'd slammed forever. He admitted his wrongs, however imperfectly. But heavier, because I knew that door didn't lead to easy reconciliation. It led to years of work, years of rebuilding trust brick by brick. And I wasn't sure he was ready to do it. The next week brought another curveball. I was in my office when Maya appeared again, this time holding a small package. "This was delivered to reception for you," she said cautiously. I frowned, accepting it. No return address, just my name scrawled in black marker. Inside was a stack of photocopied pages, printouts of my social media posts, screenshots of my bank transaction history that had been redacted and altered to look incriminating, and a final sheet with one word across it in block letters. Liar. Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. Do you want us to file this with security? Yes, I said firmly. My hands shook as I shoved the papers back into the envelope and added to the report I already filed with the police. Her nod was steady. We'll keep a record. Stay vigilant, Cass. Whoever's doing this is desperate. I didn't need to wonder who. Desperation was Danielle's specialty. That Friday night, I sat in my apartment staring at the folder labeled Evidence, now bulging with documents. I thought about the girl I used to be, the dependable daughter, the sister who never said no, the woman who carried the weight of everyone else's needs. She would have folded by now. She would have paid the bills, kept the peace, swallowed the humiliation just to be part of the family. But that version of me was gone. I was stronger now, not because I wanted to be, but because life had forced me to be. And even though Danielle was still circling, still throwing knives in the dark, I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the truth, I had proof, and most importantly, I had myself. On Sunday, Mom called again. Cass, she said softly, Marcus told me about your meeting. He said he wants to change. I leaned against the counter, closing my eyes. Wanting isn't enough. I know, she admitted, but it's a start. And for what it's worth, I believe you. About everything. I'm sorry it took me so long. Her words landed like a balm on a wound I hadn't realized was still bleeding. For months, I had felt invisible in her eyes, unseen in my pain. And now, finally, she saw me. Thank you, Mom, I whispered, my voice breaking. That evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sun dip below the skyline, I thought about justice. It didn't always come in dramatic courtroom showdowns or viral takedowns. Sometimes it came quietly, in small cracks of truth breaking through the lies. Marcus admitting he was wrong. Mom finally saying she believed me. Andre thriving on campus. Mr. Jenkins holding his head higher in the hallways. Each was a piece of justice, a thread weaving a fabric stronger than the lies Danielle had tried to spin around me. I didn't know what her next move would be. Maybe she'd double down. Maybe she'd try something even more reckless. Or maybe, just maybe, the walls she had built out of spite were starting to close in on her. Either way, I was ready. Because no matter how loud her voice was, the truth had a way of outlasting even the sharpest lies. And this time, I wasn't standing alone. I always imagined closure would feel like fireworks, loud, undeniable, impossible to ignore. But when it finally came, it wasn't fireworks at all. It was quieter, slower, like the soft settling of dust after a storm. It started with a phone call I didn't expect. The number was unfamiliar, but local. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me swipe. Hello? Cassandra Rivers? The voice was official, clipped. This is Detective Alvarez with the Atlanta Police Department. I wanted to update you on your case. My pulse quickened. The fraud case? Yes, ma'am. We traced the fake email account used to authorize the rental upgrades. It was created from an IP address registered to Danielle Carter's workplace. We also have statements from the vendor confirming they communicated only with that account. Between that and the credit card fraud tied to her address, we believe we have sufficient evidence to press charges. I gripped the counter for balance. Charges? Identity theft, forgery, attempted fraud, possibly harassment, depending on how the DA proceeds. We'll be contacting you for testimony if it moves forward. For a moment, all I could do was breathe. After months of lies, slander, and attacks, there it was. Proof. Not whispered rumors or family arguments. Proof. Thank you, I said finally, my voice trembling. When I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the folder labeled Evidence. All those nights spent documenting, collecting, refusing to back down. It hadn't been in vain. Danielle wasn't untouchable anymore. The news spread quickly. 2 days later, Mom called, her voice a mixture of shock and relief. Cass, I can't believe it, she whispered. The police came to speak with Marcus. Danielle's furious. She says you set her up. I almost laughed. Set her up? She forged my signature, opened cards in my name, and created a fake email. She set herself up. Mom sighed. Marcus is shaken. He doesn't know what to do. But Cassandra, he's finally starting to see her for who she is. I closed my eyes, a strange mix of sorrow and vindication washing over me. I never wanted my brother to suffer. I just wanted him to see the truth. Later that week, Marcus showed up at my door. For a moment, I hesitated to let him in, memories of his cold words still raw. But when I opened the door, I saw a version of him I hadn't seen in years. Defeated, vulnerable, stripped of the arrogance Danielle had wrapped him in. "Cass," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." I folded my arms, my guard still high. "Sorry for what?" He swallowed hard. "For everything, for believing her lies, for letting her pit me against you, for not defending you when you needed me most." I studied his face, searching for sincerity. And for once, I saw it there. His eyes weren't defiant or dismissive, they were heavy with regret. "Do you know what it felt like, Marcus?" I asked, my voice trembling. "To raise you like my own, to sacrifice for you, and then have you call me dead to you over money? Do you know how deep that cut?" He winced, his shoulders sagging. I was blind. Danielle, she knew how to twist me. But that's not an excuse. I should have known better. I should have trusted you. The silence stretched between us, thick with years of hurt. Finally, I let out a slow breath. "Apologies don't erase the damage. But they're a start." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I didn't say I forgave him. Not yet. But I didn't shut the door either. And maybe that was enough for now. The legal process moved slowly, as they had warned me. Danielle denied everything, of course. She painted herself as the victim, insisting I had fabricated evidence to destroy her. But the paper trail didn't lie. The fake accounts, the forged documents, the credit card tied to her address, all of it stacked against her. Meanwhile, life around me began to settle. Andre thrived at Georgia Tech, sending me updates about his projects, his grades, his growing confidence. Mr. Jenkins started smiling more at work, his pride radiating from him like light. At the office, people treated me with quiet respect, no longer whispering about gossip, but about the courage it had taken to stand firm. And slowly, painfully, my family began to thaw. Mom called more often, not to scold or pressure, but simply to check in. Alana reached out one evening, awkward but sincere, admitting she had judged me too quickly. Even Marcus, little by little, began to rebuild, texting me updates about his life, asking about mine, trying to piece together the bond Danielle had nearly destroyed. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was something. The day Danielle finally faced charges, I felt no triumph. Just relief. Relief that her lies were no longer chains around my neck. Relief that justice, however messy and delayed, had found its way through. But more than anything, I felt free. Free from the role I had been cast in for so long. The dependable sister, the silent provider, the one who gave and gave until there was nothing left. For once, I had chosen myself, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, it had opened. One evening, months later, Andre invited me to a small dinner his family hosted in their modest home. When I walked in, I was greeted with warmth so genuine it nearly broke me. Andre raised a glass during the meal, his voice steady and full of gratitude. "To Miss Cass," he said, "for believing in me when it mattered most. I promise I won't waste it." Everyone clinked glasses, and I felt tears slip down my cheeks. Because in that room, surrounded by people who truly saw me, I realized something my own family had taken years to understand. Generosity isn't about money. It's about respect. It's about seeing someone's worth, and in turn, being seen. And in that moment, I was seen. Looking back now, I don't regret a single choice. Not the arguments, not the isolation, not even the pain. Because all of it led me here, to a life built on dignity, not obligation. Yes, I lost pieces of my family. Yes, the scars will always be there. But I also gained something I had never truly had before. Freedom. And when people ask me if I'd do it all again, if I'd redirect that money away from the wedding and toward Andre's scholarship, I don't hesitate. I smile, steady and certain. Every time.